Welcome Cancer to your in-depth monthly forecast for April 2025. It's a pleasure to work with you. If you'd like to work with me directly, please check out my testimonials below for my one-to-one consultations. You can also have a video reading with me too, please see below, or please take advantage of my unique special offer. My combination reports of your life roadmap and also your 12-month transits give you an opportunity to understand the patterns that are played out in your life so far, but also get a much more intimate understanding of them, but how you can work with these in terms of the upcoming months, the next year, in order to time your moves really succinctly, when to hold off and when to go for it. And there is 30% off. Please see the link below for more. Your sign is ruled by the moon, so we always need to be mindful of the lunations. So we have a big one on the 13th, but we also have, following on from that full moon, which is in the gracious sign of Libra, a powerful new moon on the 27th, and that occurs in your sector of hopes, friendships and connections to others. But the story of this month, Cancer, begins with the potential to reach towards your ambitions, because as the month begins, we're surfing the energy of that exquisite solar eclipse in the sign of Aries, which brought the celestial curtain down on last month. But of course, concurrent to that, Neptune, the planet of dreams and idealism, moved into the fire sign of Aries too. And that fire sign energy for you represents where you connect to the wider world. It's a cardinal energy, just like yours, so very much about being a leader and also showing your authority. But the 10th house is essentially where we raise our profile. Now, if you're someone who's very keen to make progress professionally, the next 6 months could be very exciting with the support of that solar eclipse. But right at the start of this month, the dialogue around how we interact with one another is going to be affected strongly by the watery energy of Pisces, which shouldn't be a challenge for you, being a water sign. It's just that Mercury is in the mix, and Mercury isn't very comfortable in the sign of Pisces, and it's also in a retrograde. But it's in a retrograde with Venus in a conjunction through the first 10 days. But for you, the sign of Pisces is very much about where you widen your perspective. It can be about travel, higher education, but it can also be about contracts. And the critical thing is that Venus, which is in the alliance with Mercury, is also in retrograde. So retrogrades can be a time when we encounter glitches, problems, cross wires, delays, frustrations, but they can also be where we change our mind and we are totally at peace with the process. But what is going to be critical is not just the fact that they're in retrograde, it's just that Venus in particular is chaperoned by the steely, cold energies of Saturn through the spine of this month. And I would say that that's the most critical influence beyond the role of Mars in your sign, which is very important too. But Saturn is very much about the manager of karma, but it's also about timing. And because Saturn applies to Venus, if you've got a point of principle that isn't working very well in a personal relationship, or perhaps you feel confined in your physical circumstances, Saturn can be about structure, so where you live, always important to you because you're very attuned to environment. Or if you're finding it difficult to feel, for example, where you work, which can also be to do with Saturn, that it's very open, if it feels quite confined and there's a particular way of or culture within that organization that you feel is not really setting you free, that restraint can actually make you think very, very hard about this aforementioned ambitions that the energy of the solar eclipse in Neptune and also Chiron, and the Sun is going to be applying to Chiron from the 9th through to the 16th. Chiron's asking you to perhaps heal something that's outstanding around your goals and ambitions. Well, if by healing something you're actually feeling thwarted and neutered in some way, it might not be the best situation for you. So ambition in itself is good. It's good to receive greater recognition. It's good to be lauded and celebrated, but it has to feel right and it has to fit your philosophies. And if you are in a situation where that is not the case, this could be a month of big changes for you, and perhaps even some big changes of mind. But as the month begins, Jupiter, the planet of hope, which has been pushing you since the end of May last year to get in touch with a more spiritual side of your dynamic, that actually forges a very strong link to the position of the Sun, also through the first 10 days. If you've got inner resources, and Cancer people often have enormous inner resources, if you've got inner resources that you feel are not quite being fed into a situation as much as they can, or you want to do some market research or take soundings or listen to your sixth sense about what to do about your professional situation, there is a joyous link between the two through that first 10 days. But also with Venus and Mercury in a conjunction, but both in their retrogrades, any contractual matter could be something that you're rethinking as well, particularly if you feel trapped into something that doesn't work for you. But what you could think seriously about is higher education, a qualification, maybe a professional one, maybe something you want to pursue in terms of an interest. But anything to do with travel or your connections to overseas is definitely emphasized by the cluster, the posse of planets or players in the case of the North Node in the sign of Pisces this month. So for some Cancer people, I think you could be talking about jobs to do with travel, to do with actually physically moving around. You could be to do with teaching or lecturing or the media or publishing. All of these things are possible. But just be conscious that Saturn perhaps will bring with those hopes some rather exacting conditions. It won't necessarily be a walk in the proverbial park. So ambition alone, which comes from that solar eclipse, is not going to be enough. The Sun's application to Chiron won't necessarily heal something if you're not really enjoying what you're doing. So it's the classic situation where someone could be extremely well paid but totally unfulfilled, doesn't like the people, doesn't like the atmosphere. Perhaps there's a particular product or service that you're involved with that doesn't fit your moral compass. You know, if you're someone who's very keen on the environment and your employer is involved in something may not be outright sinful or illegal, but it might not suit your spiritual compass. These are the kind of questions you might find yourself asking in the month of April. But I mentioned before that Mars, the planet of passion, assertion, drive, desire, ego, individuality, has been in your sign since the 6th of January. But of course it was in your sign before then, from the 4th of September through to around about the 6th of November. And that was really pushing you to seize the limelight, to manifest what makes you different and refreshing and exciting to be around. But once Mars went into that retrograde on the 6th of January through to the 24th of February, something that did seem attractive may have started to lose its allure. And as you start this month, Mars is in direct motion, which is useful, but even though Mercury goes direct on the 7th, which could see some kind of switch in your approach, by the 13th, the full moon for you occurs in your sector of emotion, but it's opposing the Sun in its sector of ambition. But because you're ruled by the moon, the position of the moon in Libra is critical for you, particularly as it squares off with Mars in your sign. So if you're not very happy about that work-life balance, it's going to come up in a big way, not just from the retrograde, but from that full moon. So for the following 2 weeks, do be prepared for some turbulence. Maybe the turbulence is going to be self-imposed. Maybe it's you that's going to be pushing yourself to explore what your options are. Now, for some people, that could be a work from home situation. It may be that your boss or your organization is asking you to attend on a much more regular basis. That gives you less flexibility, but you could be much more militant about saying what you want, perhaps than you've ever been in your life before. Cancer people have a reputation of not enjoying conflict, but Mars in your sign may have surprised you by how you have stood up for your rights in a much more assertive way. But if you're asserting your rights and in some ways getting what you wanted, but it no longer quite fits you because of what you've learned, this is a critical point of the whole year. Now on the 13th, Venus does go direct. So with Mercury and Venus direct in your 9th house, the truth, the higher truth of a situation can be revealed. And it may be something that gives you a sense of relief. I also want you to know that Black Moon Lilith, very much to do with desire, moves from the 6th into a part of your chart that's to do with liberating your unique persona. But it does clash with Pluto in the part of your chart to do with long-term finance. Now, you could find yourself attracted to someone in a very amorous way who's not necessarily good for you in another way. It is also possible that if your relationship lacks that intimate spark and mesmeric connection, you can yearn for that. But it's also possible that you want to release your soul purpose, Black Moon Lilith in the 5th house in Scorpio, whatever the implications may be financially. So that's a very important influence for the last 2/3 of this month. But Saturn will apply to Venus on the 7th and the 25th exactly. If you do find yourself having some important meetings or discussions, at those junctures it wouldn't be a surprise. But that brings us to the 18th. Because Mars moves out of your sign, but into your 2nd house. Now that can be about everyday money, but it can also be about life foundations, but your values. But it immediately clashes with Pluto. It also immediately clashes with Black Moon Lilith. Then on the 19th, the Sun moves into a much more idealistic part of your chart and joins in on that T-square, creating a grand fixed cross. With a grand fixed cross, the worst thing any of us can do is not flex. If we refuse to bend into situations, it can create a lot of resistance, a lot of stubbornness, but also a lot of potential conflict. So be aware that even if you want to do something, you could meet opposition to your plan. But if there is a financial motive that you have at this point of the month, your desire to go for it can be very hard to resist. And as I say, you have a reputation of not liking conflict. You might be surprised by how direct you could be if there is a golden prize you want. And it could be around business, but it could be around someone that you do find so alluring that it's very difficult for you not to get caught up in that sense of attraction. But the Sun moving into Taurus is also about your future. And a little bit like Black Moon Lilith in your 5th house, the 11th house sees you needing to sate something that goes beyond money. It goes beyond ambition. So although the opposition between Mars and Pluto could make you think about money, there's another 2 influences that are asking you to be in touch with your idealism. And that could be the challenge for you at this point in the month. The 26th, beg your pardon, Mercury goes back into the sign of Aries on the 16th, which is your sector of work and it may be there's going to be some discussions on the back of that, but on the 26th, Mercury comes out of its post-retrograde shadow. So something that you've been struggling with, you may get some point of conclusion or completion at that juncture of the month, which brings us to the new moon in your 11th house. Brilliant for getting in touch with your friendships, not so good if you're feeling conflicted about what to do with your long-term future around finance. Now, Venus joins up with Mercury and also the position of Chiron on the 30th day of this month. By that time, whatever doubts, whatever process you've gone through around your career or your work will have reached a point of completion. You will have got to a point of clarity, I feel, but you may need to give something up if you are a very idealistic person in order to keep yourself feeling in balance emotionally. If you're someone who's very driven towards material gain, it could be that you won't be seeing much of your friends, and it may be that your friends are complaining, or perhaps it's your partner feels that you're far too work orientated. So that could be part of the dimension at the end of this month. It's been a pleasure being with you, Cancer. Please check out my new website at www.patrickarundell.com. It's got loads of extra content, lots of celestial goodies for you to enjoy.